So the Dalek sees the Doctor and co fighting the Daleks with the help of the files. There are action-packed escapes from prison cells, risky missions to get back into the Daleks facility, and even some romance. And, hold on. Oh sorry, wrong one. So prior to the Daleks sees the Doctor and Joe fighting the Daleks with the help of the files. There are action-packed escapes from prison cells, risky missions to get back into the Daleks facility, and even some romance. And, hold on, this is the exact same script. Okay, so Prior to the Daleks is a serial which is basically the Daleks' best hits. This serial uses a lot of plot lines and ideas from previous Nation Dalek serials. But does it bring anything new to the table, or is it just what we've seen before, but now it's in colour and the quartet is a duo? But on the other hand, we also have the return of Dalek creator Terry Nation after a nearly decade-long absence. So let's get into the plot of Prior to the Daleks and see what it's got to offer. So we immediately pick back up with the end of Frontier in Space, with a recap of events, with the Doctor and Joe leaving the Ogron planet behind them and him sending a message to the Time Lords. This is unique for this era of the show, and really works to immediately set up some tension. From there, the first section of episode 1 has the Doctor falling into a coma, similar to that of the Demons, where his body temperature was below zero, leaving Joe alone with no idea of what's happening. This does work really well for an opening, and when the TARDIS lands, it forces Joe to go out alone and try to find help, which leads to what I originally thought was an entire episode focused on Joe, although she's only alone for the first half of the episode, before she meets the Files, who ditch her in their ship and go to find the Doctor themselves. The Doctor meanwhile has quickly recovered, and despite being put in a situation where he has a limited oxygen supply, even has time to change, which is a real tension killer. It's from this point the serial really begins to show its reused element, with the Doctor soon being captured by the Daleks, with his legs being temporarily paralysed, something we only saw in the Daleks when he was captured the first time, although this time it isn't a companion who is being affected by it. So let's talk about the Daleks' plan here, and why they're on this planet. So the planet is called Spyrodon, and the Daleks have turned it into a testing ground for their experiments, with there being several different schemes going on. Notably they are working on the bacteria bomb, which they can use to exterminate all life on entire planets, while they are also working on a way to make themselves invisible, where at least for the first episode cliffhanger. After that it never comes up again. But underground they have a frozen army of Daleks, this being the army spoken about in the previous serial. Although somewhat oddly the Dalek Supreme which appeared in that serial isn't anywhere to be seen here, despite saying that he was going to that planet to awaken the army, and as we later learned the TARDIS was following that ship. This is why he sent a message to the Time Lords at the end of the last episode, as he needed them to send the TARDIS after them. This gives us a strong setup as it makes the threat feel big, from even before the serial has begun, even though that's assuming you have the previous serial's context. Although there is a big problem, and that's that the Doctor doesn't seem to know about the army at first. While he directly followed the Daleks because of what they said, he uncovers the army hidden underground and is surprised by it. This is something which has definitely come from these being two separate serials, which probably didn't have the writers talking to one another, but it's a bit strange that the entire reason that this serial is happening is something the Doctor is seemingly unaware of. So with the villain setup, let's talk about the characters, as I think that's the best place to discuss this serial. One notable thing about this serial is that it's the first Purple Era serial to not feature any humans outside of Joe, which is something we haven't seen in the show for quite a few years, not since the Crotons. That means that the only humanoid creatures are the Files alongside the Spyrodons, although only one of them is a character. Beginning with the Files, we have quite a few, with the most notable being their leader, Taran. So the Files came to Spyrodon to fight the Daleks, with most of them being killed during the landing, and more killed while on the planet. This including the commander, so Taran was put in charge, as he was the survivor with the highest rank. This does give us an interesting character, as he isn't at all suited to the position he's now in, and makes several decisions that his fellow crewmen don't agree with things becoming more complicated later when Rebek arrives. His choice to sneak around is what led to so many deaths, but you do get a sense that he really doesn't have a choice about this, given the foes they are facing, with their weapons being completely ineffective against them. The next file to discuss is Weber, who is the most outspoken against Taran, as he wants to fight the Daleks. While Taran prefers sneaking around, Weber wants action, with him attempting several attacks on the Daleks without permission and tries to gain command. The dynamic between these two is fun to watch, with Taran ultimately remaining in command due to the Doctor's presence. The most interesting file to me is Kodal, as he is the only one we really get a good sense of the person that he is, with him being a coward. While he has gone on this one-way mission, that was entirely because he was too cowardly to be the odd man out, and not to put his name forwards to go on the mission, while everyone else did. This is a big part of his character, as he does show bravery on several occasions. A notable moment is when he's prepared to sacrifice himself to distract the Spyrodons, so the others could escape. This being something he did without thinking, with the Doctor calling it brave. This does give us one of the most iconic lines of the classic era, when the Doctor is explaining courage to Kodal.
Courage isn't just a matter of not being frightened, you know. It's being afraid and doing what you have to do anyway.
The next of the Files is Rebek, who is both a love interest of Taran and the only female File. There is very little to say about her, as she doesn't really have a lot to do, and mostly acts as a problem for Taran, as he now has to worry about her while also trying to lead the rest of the Files. The only reason that Rebek exists is because Nation didn't originally write in any female characters, but was asked to do so by Terence Dix and Barry Letts, with Nation naming her after his own daughter. So it's clear that there wasn't really an idea behind her, although she does get some good moments throughout, plus her general defiance of Taran is good to watch. She wasn't one of the original Files who came to Spyrodon, and instead another group who left immediately after, and basically met with the same fate, as they had to inform the other Files that the Daleks have an army on the planet. The final file to talk about is Lartep, who is quite simple. He was a later rival with Rebek, but he isn't really memorable, to the point that I can't remember a single thing he did. In the story, he acts almost entirely as a love interest for Joe, which I'll come back to later, as this both harms his character and that of Joe's. There is one other file called Marat, who is a nothing character. He arrived on the second ship and dies almost immediately, without adding anything to the plot. In fact, he's so nothing that until I rewatched the serial, I thought it was Kodal who died here, as this took place after the Courage speech, which could have set up his death quite well. We have the one Spyrodan to discuss, that being Wesker, who is the only Spyrodan that has any personality or even any lines, with the rest just being there to do the Daleks' work. He is the one to save Jo from the plant's poison, by mixing a natural cure for her, but his biggest moment is his sacrifice to detonate the bacteria bomb before the Daleks can treat themselves with the vaccine. Now let's talk about Jo, who's basically non-existent for the majority of the serial. While the focus of the start is on her, as soon as she's in the File ship, she slips into the background, with her being poisoned due to a plant and spending a long time healing, before infiltrating the facility where she walks around a bit before saving File bombs, which were Daleks set to explode. The only other thing to note about her is the forming romance with Lartep, which is terrible. There is absolutely nothing to it, and it feels like it came out of nowhere, just to add tension to whether or not she'll return to Earth. It's a very lazy plotline which takes away from Jo, as she had a similar plotline before in Curse of Peladon, but there it was much better used, as she was an actual character in the dynamic. You could tell that both her and Peladon's feelings were getting in the way of their decisions. While here it just exists because Jo needs something to do, the nation couldn't think of anything else, and so it's just a lazy version of the Barbara plotline from the Daleks. The Doctor is last up and feels fine. It's a very different story for the Third Doctor, as it feels closer to an early Hartnell story, with there not being too many moments where he can shine. I've already discussed his speech about courage, but his other great moment is at the end where he talks about war, and how the File should tell their people about what happened, wanting them to avoid becoming a war-loving race. It is a really great moment, and I think works well to end the serial, fitting in perfectly with Third's character. It does somewhat reflect the Doctor's original final speech to the Files, but now he's a very different character, in a very different place. I think that this showing of the Doctor's growth here is the serial's strongest moment. One very interesting thing though about the Doctor is that he's become a legend among the Files, due to his help fighting the Daleks. We haven't really seen the Doctor meeting the people again and seeing how his presence impacted them, but beyond that it does cause some tension within the File group too, as it seems too coincidental that he just showed up, but he is ultimately able to prove himself. It also gives us a nice callback to the original quartet, which feels like the first time in ages that previous companions have been talked about. But one thing to mention that is notable is perhaps the most stupid moment in the show yet. This is when the Daleks are about to destroy the File ship and he believes that Jo is inside, so the Doctor runs out to stop the Daleks by saying, "Wait, there's someone inside." Now if this was the first time that the Doctor met the Daleks, this would make sense. But this isn't, and he should be well aware that saying that there is someone inside the ship won't do anything, and it will most likely lead to his own death. It's such a stupid moment, and while I understand him wanting to take action, he knows that it won't matter to the Daleks. Plus, it's just Nation wanting to redo the whole paralysed legs things again. I don't really have anything to say about the Daleks, sadly, as there isn't anything too interesting to them. Although I do want to note how they decided to put the treatment machine for the bacteria bomb in the same room as the bacteria bomb, allowing for the bacteria to be contained after Wesker releases it. It's a bit stupid for the Daleks. There is one big thing for the Daleks though, and that's the Dalek Supreme. So while we have had several Supremes before, this serial introduces a new type, which is above all the others, being a part of the Supreme Council. This Dalek has a very unique design, which I really like, but at the same time, the oversized lights and torture and eye is definitely odd. Now this Dalek's history is very interesting. So for some context, by this point the BBC only had 3 Daleks left, and so several new dummies were made, but they couldn't be operated and so were kept in the background to build up numbers. But to increase the numbers further, the BBC drafted in an outsider. The Supreme Dalek was in fact the Dalek owned by Nation himself, and to cut a long story short, it was one he purchased to use in a never-made Dalek spin-off he was trying to make during the late 60s. This means that the Dalek has a very different history to its TV counterparts. Although it was still made by Shawcraft models, with most notably appearing as the Gold Dalek in the second Dalek movie, its history stretches further back than that, as it was originally made to be the leader for the stage play The Curse of the Daleks back in 1965. This was just one of many Daleks owned by Nation, and for their full history I'd highly recommend the videos of Dalek 6388. So on the behind the scenes we have to begin with the colorisation. We've taken a bit of a break from this section due to every episode now existing in the form of the original master tapes, but episode 3 of this serial only survived in the form of a black and white copy, but like with several others there was no surviving low quality colour version. This led to the episode remaining in black and white for a time until the chrome dot recovery method was discovered, this episode being the first to be recolorised this way. Although this story does get more interesting, as there was a colorising attempt by a computer method in San Diego. Neither was considered 100% perfect, so the version on DVD is a combination of these two different methods. This leads to an episode which is a bit different in appearance to others which use the chroma dot method, with the Doctor's clothing being very vibrant, but the end result is very nice to look at. It's probably one of my favourite looking colorised episodes. Next we have Nation, who has made his big return to the show after an 8-year absence. This absence does explain why his script feels quite different to what we've seen in the show of late, as there is a sense that he's still writing his scripts like they're for the early Hartnell seasons. Another notable thing is that because of his long absence, Nation was unaware that the show was no longer using individual episode titles, and so he titled all of his episodes, with them being Destinus, Mission Survival, Pursued, Escape or Die, The Day Before Eternity, and Victory. So now it's time to talk about the reused aspects of this serial. My opening line should have made it clear that this serial reuses a lot of elements from previous Nation Dalek serials, and that's basically this serial's reputation. So I probably won't mention everything in here, but here's a few. So we have the living jungle with the plants that are more like animals, which is a mission to the unknown and Dalek's master plan thing. The Doctor's capture, which is the same as in the Daleks, but in that case it was Chesterton who was paralysed. The escape, which involves the group being trapped in a room with the Daleks cutting their way in before escaping up a shaft, where they drop something on the pursuing Dalek. The romantic subplot between a companion and a fowl. The invisible aliens was an idea used in Master Plan. The Daleks using bacteria as a weapon, which while off-screen was talked about in Dalek Invasion of Earth. The attack on the Daleks' facility, which has the group split up to attack from 2 different angles. The use of a Dalek casing as a disguise, although this is for a break-in instead of an escape, so he changed something. And there's definitely more, but that's quite a few from just off the top of my head. When Nation had recycled ideas before, Dalek Invasion of Earth was very similar to the Daleks, although on Earth with aspects changed around, but it feels incredibly lazy here. Not even like it's pandering to the audience's nostalgia, but just he had nothing new to add. While it is cool to see Nation writing for the Daleks again, after such a long time you'd expect something new, or at least something different. So that's Plight of the Daleks, and it's not the best. It's not especially bad, but it's just the same again. I'd much rather watch the Daleks over it, even though it is shorter and doesn't really suffer the same slow feeling that the Daleks developed towards the end. The ideas that Nation is reusing were stronger in those serials when they were first used, and there's much better Dalek serials to watch instead. It's not the greatest return for one of the original writers, and feels more like he needed money rather than had an idea or a story he wanted to tell. It has a reputation, and it definitely deserves it. But with the Doctor and Joe back on Earth, trouble is kicking off once again, as a man has died and developed a mysterious green glow. All seems to point to a nearby chemical company being responsible for the strange goings on underground, and the Doctor has to say goodbye to a friend. Next time, the Green Death.